My name is Laura Story Johnson, and I am a researcher with the Nexus Institute. Together with my colleague Rebecca Surtees, and with funding from the Australian Department of Home Affairs through the Regional Support Office of the Bali Process, we are pleased to launch this Practitioner Guide Series on the protection of trafficking victims in ASEAN and Bali Process member states. Practitioners, including social workers, healthcare practitioners, psychologists and counselors, child protection specialists, law enforcement, lawyers and paralegals, teachers and school administrators, vocational trainers, job counselors, business experts, public administrators, and others are at the front line of trafficking victim protection. To effectively do their work, these professionals must have a thorough understanding of the needs of trafficking victims of all genders, ages, nationalities, and experiences of exploitation. And yet, many anti-trafficking practitioners do not have easy access to high-quality research on trafficking victim protection. Practitioners generally also do not have time to read and distill this vast body of literature to identify findings that they can use in their direct daily work. To address this constraint, the Nexus Institute authored a series of practitioner guides to support the protection work of practitioners in ASEAN and Bali Process member states. The series was developed in collaboration with RSO and explores the following key protection issues: trafficking victim identification, trafficking victim protection and support, recovery and reintegration of trafficking victims, special and additional measures for child trafficking victims, special and additional measures for victim witnesses, and access to remedies. These topics are in line with the 6 thematic areas of the ASEAN ACWC regional guidelines and procedures to address the needs of victims of trafficking in persons, which were developed in support of the implementation of the ASEAN Convention on Trafficking in Persons, or ACTIP. Each individual practitioner guide identifies and distills existing evidence on a discrete victim protection issue and presents it in a succinct and accessible format to help practitioners better understand key issues and challenges. It is important that we, as practitioners, understand and take into account the needs of trafficking victims in the work that we do and also how we do that work. The Nexus Institute has conducted extensive research in ASEAN and Bali Process member states on all aspects of victim protection. These practitioner guides draw on that research and share the real-life knowledge and experiences of both trafficking victims and anti-trafficking practitioners. Victim protection interventions must be victim-centered and survivor-informed. These practitioner guides build from research with trafficking victims of diverse genders, ages, nationalities, and experiences of exploitation, and incorporate their voices, sharing their direct knowledge, experiences, and needs to enhance victim protection policies and programs. The practitioner guides also incorporate research with anti-trafficking practitioners on the barriers and challenges they face in their work and how to overcome these barriers and challenges. This learning is key in developing and providing practical guidance for practitioners to operationalize in their day-to-day work, to make changes and improve the victim protection response. Each practitioner guide serves as a standalone resource for practitioners to operationalize in their work at the national and local levels. The practitioner guides are user-friendly, with content presented in an accessible and visual format. They include quotes and reflections from victims and practitioners, as well as notepads and mini exercises that can be used as a workbook for training and capacity building. While the target audience is practitioners engaged in the protection of adult and child trafficking victims, the guides may also be used by policymakers tasked with improving practice and procedures in trafficking victim identification, victim protection and support, recovery and reintegration, special measures for child trafficking victims, supporting victim witnesses in legal proceedings, and supporting trafficking victims to access remedies. Finally, as all aspects of victim protection should be trauma-informed, victim-sensitive, child-friendly, gender-sensitive, and culturally appropriate, each practitioner guide provides specific guidance on each of these to ensure the ethical protection of trafficking victims in ASEAN and Bali Process member states. The first practitioner guide in the series focuses on identification of victims of trafficking. Victim identification is the process by which an individual is identified as a trafficking victim, which in turn entitles them to rights and protections. While formal identification should lead to and facilitate the opportunity for a victim to be referred for assistance, this does not always occur in practice. This practitioner guide reviews existing research on victim identification and non-identification and explores why some victims are or are not identified, challenges in the identification process, and practices that may enhance victim identification. The second practitioner guide in the series focuses on trafficking victim protection and support. Victims of trafficking are entitled to and should receive immediate protection from their exploiters and from the possibility of further harm, including the risk of re-trafficking. They should receive support to meet their immediate needs and ensure their well-being, irrespective of their willingness to participate in criminal justice procedures. This practitioner guide reviews existing research on the protection and support of trafficking victims, both in terms of what exists and what challenges arise in the provision of protection and support. Many challenges are a result of structural and institutional issues in the protection framework, which may be addressed by practitioners. However, some barriers are due to how victims understand and experience protection and support, as well as their individual interactions with practitioners. Understanding these different and sometimes competing factors is key in protecting and supporting trafficking victims. The third practitioner guide focuses on the recovery and reintegration of trafficking victims. Recovery and reintegration is a complex and costly undertaking, often requiring a full and diverse set of services for victims and sometimes their families, who themselves have widely differing short and long-term physical, psychological, social, and economic needs. Once the immediate needs of trafficked persons have been met, many victims require further assistance to reintegrate into their families and communities, such as vocational training, economic support, long-term access to healthcare, counseling, education, and family mediation. Some assistance needs are a consequence of trafficking, while others may be linked to vulnerabilities that existed before victims were trafficked, as well as issues that have arisen in victims' lives after trafficking. Because successful reintegration can take years to achieve, reintegration services must be available in the long term and include follow-up and case management. This practitioner guide reviews and synthesizes existing research on recovery and reintegration of trafficking victims, including barriers and challenges in the reintegration process, as well as opportunities and entry points for supporting sustainable reintegration. The fourth practitioner guide in the series focuses on special and additional measures for child trafficking victims. ACTIP explicitly recognizes that child victims, all victims under age 18, have special needs and that appropriate measures are needed to ensure the safety and well-being of child victims, from identification to the securing of longer-term support. Care and protection must be made available on an equal and non-discriminatory basis, with no distinction between child nationals and child non-nationals. Special attention should be paid to assessing and meeting the requirements of children who are additionally vulnerable, such as the very young, those with disabilities, and those who have suffered severe exploitation and abuse. This practitioner guide reviews existing research on the specific needs and experiences of trafficked children, as well as measures in place and challenges faced to protect them. Based on this analysis, practitioners will be guided to a deeper understanding of how to more effectively address the critical issues that arise in implementing special and additional measures for trafficked children. The fifth practitioner guide focuses on special and additional measures for trafficking victims who serve as victim witnesses. Victims of trafficking are entitled to be involved and have their views known in any legal case concerning them. Victims should be encouraged but not compelled to participate in the prosecution of their exploiters. Before, during, and after their involvement in the criminal justice process, victims should be provided with appropriate information, assistance and support, and protection from re-traumatization. This practitioner guide reviews and synthesizes existing research on special and additional measures to ensure the safety and well-being of trafficking victim witnesses. The final practitioner guide focuses on supporting trafficking victims to access remedies. Trafficking victims are entitled to justice for the crimes and human rights violations committed against them. Access to remedies for trafficking victims is key, not only to support victims' recovery, but also to reaffirm their rights and prevent re-victimization. Remedies often provide financial means, which can help to support reintegration and reduce vulnerability to re-trafficking. Remedies can also contribute to victims' emotional and psychological recovery and provide a sense of justice and closure. Remedies, restitution, and compensation should be adequate and appropriate, proportional to the gravity of the violation, and adapted to the circumstances of the case. This practitioner guide distills existing research on the right to an effective remedy, including both a trafficking victim's substantive right to that remedy and the procedural rights necessary to secure it. To support the implementation and operationalization of the Practitioner Guide Series, the Nexus Institute and Bali Process RSO also developed a series of 6 facilitator modules, one to accompany each practitioner guide. Each facilitator module provides detailed, step-by-step guidance to train practitioners in the specific thematic area. Finally, as part of this project and accompanying the Practitioner Guide and Facilitator Module series, the Nexus Institute and RSO have also produced guidance on how to develop a directory of services for trafficking victims. A directory of services for trafficking victims is a vital tool for trafficking victims to access the assistance needed to recover and reintegrate after trafficking, as well as for practitioners in referring and assisting victims. A directory of services is different from a referral mechanism, as a directory of services is a published resource, whether hard copy or electronic, that is intended to be used by victims of trafficking themselves. A directory of services is also more than just a list of service providers. It is a tool to empower trafficking victims and survivors and enable them to understand and name their experiences of exploitation, as well as to seek out the services that they need. A directory of services can play a critical role in the protection of trafficking victims. Too often, both practitioners and victims are unaware of the services and assistance available in their communities. While trafficking victims are the primary target audience of this type of directory of services, it can also be used by practitioners to strengthen their knowledge and enable them to better protect trafficking victims by providing relevant, useful, and up-to-date information about available services. Practitioners also play an important role in the distribution and dissemination of a directory of services. The Nexus Institute is pleased to have partnered with RSO on this important project. This project and its many outputs support the efforts of governments, international organizations, and civil society in their ongoing programming, policy, and capacity building work on trafficking victim protection. As practitioners, we face challenges in protecting trafficking victims. Overcoming these challenges requires us to have a thorough understanding of the needs of a diverse range of trafficking victims. This Practitioner Guide series and the accompanying publications share learning and experiences from trafficking victims themselves, as well as from other practitioners, offering a comprehensive and holistic overview of key issues and challenges in the protection of adult and child trafficking victims, and practical guidance for practitioners to operationalize in their day-to-day work to support an enhanced victim protection response in ASEAN and Bali Process member states. We at the Nexus Institute are deeply committed to enhancing efforts on trafficking victim protection. Please feel free to contact us with any questions or comments about the Practitioner Guide Series, the facilitator modules, or the tools for developing a directory of services for trafficking victims. We also invite you to visit our website to access research conducted by the Nexus Institute on all aspects of victim protection in ASEAN and Bali Process member states. Thank you.